excited to have Mackenzie Wollenzien on the show today. How are you, Mackenzie?
I'm good. I'm nervous, but this will be fun.
I'm nervous. We're all nervous.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
excited to have you to myself today. Normally, we're in more of a group conversation, and today we're actually going to be talking about you and your astrology. So,
I know it'll be weird. I feel like I don't talk about myself much, so it'll be
right?
a growing moment, I guess.
As astrologers, I feel like we're so used to looking outwards, like we're always looking at other people's charts and stuff. And not that we don't look at our own charts and our own life stuff, but it is a little bit nerve wracking. I've actually thought about like having people come on and me probably it would be like you and Jen coming on and we could do like a group reading of my chart
Yes.
at some point. So don't worry, you can get me back at some point. I That's on the cards. But you have been on my guest list for some time, and I just wanted to sit down and get some more information about you, for the audience because you're here all the time.
I
And
know.
so I thought it would be a good chance for people to get to know you a little bit better
Well,
and see what's
thank you
going
for
on.
having me. I'm excited.
Thank you for being here. I know,
And
me
we've
too.
got,
So go ahead.
oh, we've got our doves outside. So, oh, Cardinal almost flew in the window. So,
Oh
good
my
signs.
gosh. So this is the thing to know about Mackenzie. Mackenzie is like always spotting like every wild animal. You have this like beautiful backyard view.
Hmm.
What is
Yes.
what is that like? Is day to day you just like sit and do your bird watching, do your animal watching?
Yeah, I mean, I sit right here and I do like my studies and like take my chart notes and do all that stuff. And so, like, right behind the computers, there's like this big window, and I've got a big door right here, and just lots of birds and wildlife. And I don't know, it just like, it always means something to me, like a bird. It's just kind of like, oh, that's a nice sign. And yeah, I've got my two doves. So I know you have your two doves that you see all the time too, so it's a good sign, like
Yeah.
a little meaningful. But yeah, it's like a little peaceful, and as a Libra, I need a peaceful environment to be able to like do my studies and do my work. So it's nice.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you also have like a whole bunch of action in your sixth house. So I'm not surprised that you are just like so into animals the way that you are.
Hmm. And it's funny, like I found my baby book a few months ago, and in it, my mom had written like Mackenzie loves all animals. I was like, oh, that's stuck with me my whole life, so that's kind of nice. And yeah,
Oh,
I love animals.
I love
I've got lots
Yeah,
of animal tattoos as well, so it's funny.
I love that too. That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you have your Venus in the sixth house in Scorpio. So that feels like very animal tattoo vibes, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I've not even thought about it that way. That makes so much sense. We need to
You
get
also
Shane to
have
do
your
that.
Libra Mercury, right? You have your Libra Mercury in the sixth house as well. So I don't know. I feel like, can you talk to your animals? Like, do you talk to your cats and stuff? And
Oh yeah.
do you feel
I
like you
like
you understand them?
I do, and like I felt like I was like a little nuts for a little bit because I was like, I feel like I can literally read their mind, but I just feel like I know them so well, and I'm around them all the time when I'm home anyway, and yeah, I just feel like I know what they're thinking, and like even just like the subtle expressions on their face, I'm like, oh yeah, she's annoyed, like don't go near her, you know. But even when I was little, definitely. But yeah, it's this a connection, I think, that I've always felt. And I think Lori, in my reading with her, she said something about like, can you like talk to your animals? And I was like, yeah, you know what? I think I can. Like, but yeah.
Yeah. I believe it. I believe it looking at your chart. I was thinking about it today because I don't, I have your chart. I've looked at it before, but I just never clocked that you had your Mercury in the sixth house for whatever reason. So that really was like standing out to me today. And I was like, wow, that just like makes all the sense in the world. And I
Yeah.
know that you are very like close to your cats. You have three cats.
Hmm. I
So
do.
I'm like, I would bet that Mackenzie is like reading their minds and having conversations and
Yeah. And like they all have their own personality and
mm,
they're all so funny in their own way. I just
yeah,
love being around
yeah,
them.
yeah. So you have a Gemini rising, you got a Gemini moon,
Hmm.
Cancer Mars, you're a Libra sun and Mercury, and then
Hmm.
you've got a Scorpio Venus. And then, you were born in 94, so you've got, quite a bit of, you've also got, Scorpio, Jupiter, and Pluto as well. And then
Hmm.
you've got the Capricorn, Neptune, and Uranus. And we've talked about before on this podcast, you have a Pisces Saturn. You just had your Saturn return not too long ago.
I did.
And look at you now.
I
I feel like
know.
it looks good on you, like
Oh,
to
thank
to
you.
be over the hill.
Right. It was funny. Like during that month, I would say it was like kind of like intense. Like everything just felt
Mm,
really like big, I think. And so after that, I'm kind of like I feel like I'm chilling again. Like I'm like, oh,
yeah.
like that really wasn't that bad. But
Yeah, yeah.
mhm, it's been
I love that.
yeah part of the
Do
growing,
you
I
have a
guess.
right? Do you have a favorite part of your chart?
Um, you know, I really like my fifth house sun, and
Mm-hmm.
I like that it trines my ascendant like almost exactly, and then um, I like having a first house moon. I think um, makes me. I'm really not able to like hide certain parts of myself. Like
Mm-hmm.
definitely my emotions. Like I wear my emotions like just right on my face. It just comes right out, and I can't hide that. So I think that's. I also like my Venus and Jupiter. I really like
Yeah.
that conjunction. Um, I don't know. All parts
There's a
of
lot to
it.
like, right?
Yeah.
I know it's hard to
Oh,
pick
well,
a
thank you.
favorite, but
Yes.
yeah. I was thinking also about that fifth house sun. So I know that you were a dancer for a long time. Did you do other athletics or was it just dance?
Um, I'm trying to remember. It's been a long life. It feels like. Uh,
That
I
was
think
your past life.
right. I did gymnastics when I was really little, and then
Mm.
I was also doing dance at the same time. But dance was the one that I just really it like spoke to me or whatever, and so I really stuck with that until high school, and then I did like dance team in high school. I don't know. Dance was the one for me. Like I think I thought sports like were interesting, but
Hmm.
it was always just dance, I think. And I tried
Yeah.
cheerleading, but it was not, I don't know. I didn't like parts of it. And so, yeah, just dance.
Yeah. What parts of
Specifically,
cheerleading did you not like?
um, I didn't like the yelling. Like I was just like, I'm not a yeller. Like, and I didn't like just, I don't know. Like football is fine, but I was
Hmm.
not like super into like sports, and so I'm like, I have no idea what's going on, you know? And so
Right.
I'm like,
Right. Yeah. It's funny. It's a sport that like in a lot of instances I know that they do competitive stuff, but it's like it's centered around another sport. So
yeah,
like that's a weird kind of aspect of that world, I think.
exactly. Yeah. I was like, I don't know what's happening. And so I only did that for 1 year. And oh, there's so much drama too. And I'm just like, I don't know about this. So
Yeah. So when did you start dance? How like what age did you kind of get into that?
I was 3. And so I started when I was
Wow.
3. Yeah. I still remember it too.
Yeah.
I just remember wearing my leotards around all the time. And
Oh.
yeah, just little me. And yeah, then I stuck with it till like my sophomore or junior year of high school. And then, you know, other things become more important at that stage in life. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So I imagine that you like with that fifth house sun in Libra that it would be something that would be a really central part of your life, like, and
Hmm.
just something that probably brought you an enormous amount of joy. And I don't know,
Yes.
like it's not even, I'm just imagining like it being something that makes you feel most alive.
Hmm. Definitely. And you know, I always like talk about dance as being like my first love, like which sounds so like weird, but I think people that like were so involved in dance, like especially early in life, and me specifically, it was ballet, and I don't know, it was just something that was like part of me, and it's still a part
Mhm.
of me. Even like, I went to the ballet a few weeks ago, and that was just like I don't know, it just like touches like a very deep part of myself. I don't know how to explain it, and um, it's always very emotional, but it's really cool, and just like the arts
Yeah.
and like that performing, and it's just so beautiful, you know. And I
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
yeah, and like
And
I know not
you do have
everybody.
this,
Oh,
go ahead.
just I know that not everybody feels like that, but it feels like everybody should feel like that. That's how I feel.
Yeah. And you have this gracefulness to you just naturally. So I just feel I can see like ballet specifically being a really good fit for you just because you do have this like it's hard to explain. Like I do feel like with that Libra Mercury, you do have this natural way of when you do things like that are just normal to you. I feel like there is this kind of gracefulness to it and almost like a
Hmm.
delicacy to it. So I can just see you being like right at home in, like on a stage
Hmm.
specifically doing that kind of dance.
Yeah. And it's funny, like I was really clumsy when I was little. And so I think the dance kind of helped me with like, you know, finding that balance, which is funny.
Hmm.
As a Libra, it helped me find the balance.
Right.
But yeah, definitely like on the stage and like in class, I had better balance. But then like, you know, IRL, like in real life, it was kind of like I don't know, I think more clumsy. I don't know. It's hard to explain,
Hmm.
but thank you for saying
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I wondered if you have the Gemini rising as well. So I feel like you probably have this certain level of like physical energy and you know a need to keep yourself occupied and stuff. And so sometimes I feel like my own clumsiness comes from not being able to like slow down and
Hmm.
be a little bit more deliberate. And so I wonder if doing something like ballet kind of gave you that ability to kind of slow down and you
Yeah.
know be a little bit more present in the moment, whereas like maybe out in the world it would be easier to be like gangbusters like doing whatever.
Yes. Yes, definitely. And I think with that Gemini energy, it kind of is like a nervous energy, like very like cerebral, you know. And so it really brings you down into your body, which is something that I'm really glad I had that like so early on. Um, really helped with that nervous energy, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And so you were born in Iowa and that's
Hmm.
where you grew up. What is your relationship to Iowa?
You know, it's different day to day, and I think I'm coming to terms with like still living in Iowa. I think I was always like,
Mm,
I always dreamt that when I grew up, I'd live like on the West Coast, like, you know, in California. That's kind of where I always dreamed I would end up. And, you know, I still might someday. Um,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
yeah, and, you know, both sides of my family, like the ancestors and stuff, like they've been here for a while, which I think is funny. That like I always thought like why did they choose to settle in Iowa? And you know it does have its beauty, and um, you know it's not as expensive as other places, so that's nice as well. So um, I'm finding ways to love it, and because I think for a while I'm like no, like it's Iowa, like we don't like
Yeah.
yeah, like that kind of energy. I'm like I don't want to live here forever, but there's beauty in it.
Hmm.
So
When you were younger, like what how did you feel about where you lived?
um I think I was like almost embarrassed because, like even in movies and stuff, they'd be like, oh, like small town Iowa girl. But like I'm from Des Moines, and so like it's the biggest
Mhm.
city in Iowa, which is
Right.
still pretty small. But um, there's not a whole lot of like diversity in certain parts, like
Mhm.
where I grew up on in a suburb. So I didn't see a whole lot of diversity until I got
Mhm.
to like high school, and that's kind of when I went to a Catholic school my freshman and sophomore year, and not a whole lot of diversity there. But then junior, senior year, I went to the public school, and there was a lot more there, and kind of opened your eyes a little bit. And it's like, oh wow, like I was so sheltered before, and so,
Yeah.
hmm
I guess I didn't realize that you changed schools in the middle of high school.
yeah, I
You
was.
know, it's funny, I did that too.
I know. I think I knew that, and I was like, oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Like I did that
Mhm.
too. But yeah, Catholic school was not for me. I just did not fit in there, and oh,
Yeah.
that was one of those places where it's like everyone was in everyone's business, and the
Mm.
mean girls and stuff like that. And I was kind of like a little odd, and um, I was more of a partier back then, which is funny because I'm definitely not these days. But that was one
Yeah.
of my several phases that I went through.
Right.
But
Yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting that you say that because I had written down, I've heard you say before that you are almost like a different person than you used to
hmm
be.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think a lot of us like experience some, version of that. But for you, I was thinking about it with your North Node in Scorpio. And it's like it is
hmm
this kind of like you've had these multiple lives
hmm
within one. It's like, I don't know, how do you think about that in regards to your North Node?
I hadn't before, but now that you say that, it really makes sense. Just kind of like this continual like transformation of self. And I'm glad I'm
Yeah.
living in that North Node because sometimes I'm like, am I like you just don't think of that. So yeah, I feel like I've worn lots of hats throughout this life. And yeah, just totally different as well. Just in like the mindset and how I like am. It's kind of like I've done that full spectrum type of thing.
Yeah. I feel like that makes you have so much more understanding, like having lived all of these different lives, you
Yeah.
can relate to a lot of other people's experiences too,
hmm
which is really cool.
Yeah. I think it definitely helps even in like just like readings and then just like meeting new people. Like I almost find that I'm able to relate in some way to most people. Um, that could be my Libra as well. But just like finding that common ground and um, stuff like that. But yeah, I've just it's weird. I'll say something like about like, my past life or whatever, like past versions of myself, and
Hmm.
people are like, "Oh, that's so surprising." I'm like, "Oh, if you knew me back then, like you would say, "Oh, not at all." Yeah.
Right. How do you kind of look at those old versions of yourself? Like do they feel that separate from you? Like they are different people?
Sometimes they do. But like I've learned to like I need to like integrate that, and
Hmm.
that's been something that I've been working through in therapy, of course. Not like judging those past versions of myself, and kind of learning to accept like all those versions of myself because yeah, I went through a really difficult phase there where I struggled with a lot of things, addictions and stuff like that. And I think I wasn't myself during those phases. And so, um,
Right.
having to work through that and kind of accept that as part of myself. And I think part of that is kind of separating those parts of yourself and kind of um, learning to love and accept that. And then you're like, oh, that is me. Like that's inside of me. And so it's been a process.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine that like I don't know, it's a very interesting experience to like have these distinct kind of phases of your
Hmm.
life.
Yeah.
How do you like look at the North Node, when you explain to clients and things, like how do you describe that to them?
You know, I tend to, it's not like I gloss over it, but I don't put a whole lot of emphasis in readings.
Mhm.
But yeah, I always say it's kind of like this overarching theme that you might notice, like at certain times in your life, you're kind of like nudged in certain directions. And it's kind of like this overarching, like emphasis, not even an emphasis, but it's kind of like
Mhm.
this theme that pops up that
Mhm.
like you kind of feel like you're being nudged in a certain direction. And it's just like this, like almost your experiences kind of point to it. And
Right.
yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's one of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually describe it as what we're here to learn in this lifetime, and I always tell
Hmm.
people we're here to learn a lot of different things, so I don't like people to get too like hung up on the
Hmm.
nodes and all that because I do think that there is some of that that happens. I do think
Hmm.
it's an interesting thing to look at, but it's not like I feel like some people make it like a pass or fail thing, like I'm not living in my in my north
Yeah,
node.
yeah. And I feel like, yeah, and just like in pop astrology, they're like, if you're not living in your north node, then like you're failing this life or whatever. Like they make it sound
Yeah.
like if you're not, like I think they almost make it seem like if you are living in your south node, then like you're living in the past, which is like, you know, actually that's your gifts that you came into this life with. So it's kind of like, why wouldn't you utilize those gifts? So,
Absolutely.
hmm.
Absolutely. Well, and then speaking of, so your south node is always opposite the north node. Your
Hmm.
south node is, of course, in Taurus. How do you see those kind of skills and gifts playing into your life?
It's a that's one of those ones that I'm just like, what is it? Because it's in that 12th house, so it's kind of like this
Hmm.
weird thing. I feel like I've always felt connected to something. I grew up Catholic, and so I grew up with like, this is what you're supposed to believe. And from a very young age, I kind of was like, I don't know about that, and like not to judge people who like have those beliefs, but like for me, it wasn't enough almost. And the judgmental side of that, it was just always like, I don't know about this. And
Hmm.
so I feel like I've always had a certain level of faith. And I have gone through phases of my life. Like I had a very life changing accident, and that kind of made me lose my faith for a while. And that was kind of what I call the dark times. And, so finding that connection and that level of faith is something that was really important to me to kind of um, keep going in life. And so with that South Node, I think it kind of, I think Lori said one time, she was like, you could have been a monk in a past life. And so, you know,
Right.
right. So,
It does give structured spirituality, which is so interesting
yeah.
when you're saying that like being Catholic didn't really feel like enough to you. And it's
Hmm.
funny because looking at that South Node and mentioning you could have been a monk kind of a
Yeah.
thing, it's it's funny because it does feel like your direction is a little bit more expansive. It's a little bit more broad than sort of
Hmm.
like an organized religion.
Yeah, definitely. And I think meditation was really important for me to find. Because before
Hmm.
it would be like prayer. And
Right.
like, even when I kind of separated myself from like Catholicism and just like was like, I don't know what I believe, I still prayed. Prayer has always been like part of my life. Not always, I guess, but like definitely in like certain like points that are like significant, I think.
Right.
So I'm glad I had that. Like I was raised with prayer and stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. What did you was there anything that you liked about being Catholic?
I definitely liked like the ritualistic side of things. I was an
Mm-hmm.
altar girl, and so I liked being
Slay.
like I right altar girl, but I liked feeling important in that. I think holding the book for the priest to read and like lighting the candles and
Mm-hmm.
like setting the altar, which is so funny because I have like my own altar now that I like I mess with sometimes, but yeah, definitely that side of things and like the stained glass, like the aesthetics, of course.
Mm.
But yeah,
Yeah. I mean, Catholic churches know how to pop off with an aesthetic. I will say
right?
that.
Yes.
I grew up mostly in churches that were, you know, evangelical contemporary Christian. So a lot of these spaces were not like traditional churchy vibes. Like a lot of them were in, a strip mall that had been converted into a church space, you know, a
Yeah.
corporate building that had been converted into a mega church.
Hmm.
It's these very different spaces. And so as somebody, I moved from an evangelical school to a Catholic school midway through high school to get away from it. That was my escape route. Was
Yes.
I was like, at least the Catholics, like my parents wouldn't send me to public school despite my efforts.
Uh-huh.
So I went to Catholic school as a relief. And I was like, this is a lot prettier than the stuff that I'm used to. So there was
Right.
that.
Right.
They got incense up in there, swinging it
Oh yeah,
around. Yeah.
that too.
Yeah. Very
That
different
is
vibes than yeah, it was like a completely different thing for me. So, I got a little taste of, I was a Catholic schoolgirl for a couple years.
Did you guys
A
have
little taste of it.
uniforms?
I did have uniforms. They were hideous. They were really ugly.
Oh my god,
They
same.
were probably the ugliest uniforms that you could find for a Catholic school. Probably in the world, I would think.
Oh no.
They were so ugly. I know. And that was really disappointing to me because I would have rocked a plaid skirt
Oh no.
like
Yeah.
there was no tomorrow. I would have been all into that. These were khaki skirts. And when I
Oh
say
no.
khaki, like they were like squirts, they were horrible,
Yep.
horrible.
Oh
So
no.
it wasn't the relief, aesthetically that I was hoping
Uh-huh.
on a personal level. So I just had to
Yes.
suffer through the uniform, unfortunately. But I did find it a really interesting space, and I did feel like Catholics knew how to party. Like that was the big
Oh yeah.
difference that I noticed. And I was like, you guys like dance and drink and party, and evangelicals just like have a stick in their ass. So
Yep.
that was the big difference. I was like, well, at least these people like know how to have a good time, you know,
Right.
and they aren't like constantly like on my case for no reason.
Hmm.
That was my big relief. But do you feel like your spirituality now was influenced in any way by, your Catholic upbringing?
Um, sometimes I see similarities, but for me, I feel like I almost had to like totally like separate myself. And I like, I went through a period of time where I really didn't believe in anything. Like it was like,
Yeah,
I was like, it was one of those points in life where you're like, what's the point? And so,
right.
that was kind of when like my own like awakening happened where it's kind of like, you just, at least for me, I just like totally hit like rock bottom in life really. And I was like, just what's the point? And so from there, it really was like truly an awakening. And I wish I knew like the exact date of kind of like, or like time period of when all this started happening. But, just I started looking for like synchronicities and signs and um, kind of like looking for reasons to keep going because like I didn't want to give up. Like I wanted to, you know, find a way to enjoy life again. And so it was just like a slow process. And then it was really a connecting back with myself and connecting like with my body. And I spent a lot of my life not connected to my body, and so it really was like a connecting to myself and connecting to the earth, which is funny. That's Taurus, that South Node
Mm-hmm.
in the 12th. But yeah, just it's been like a slow process, which I'm grateful for because I've heard like, you and Carrie last week saying like when it's like that fast, rapid, like that's usually not the awakening that you think it is. So,
Yeah.
hmm
So you were in this moment where you felt like there was nothing.
hmm
How do you like if you talk to people that are kind of in that space, like what kind of advice might you give people that are like feeling like there is, nothing to connect with? And I know it's very different for everyone, but I
hmm
wonder just due to your experience, like what you might tell somebody that's feeling similarly.
yeah. No, I think this is an Albert Einstein quote, but it's like there's like two ways that you can live life. Like one of them, like nothing is a miracle, and the other way, like everything is a miracle. And so it really was kind of like switching that mindset. And I really had to take a hard look at my life and kind of um, cut away at like the toxic parts, and that was,
Yeah.
one thing at a time. But yeah, and then after that, I really like that is something that it's become like a belief that everything is a miracle, and um, that kind of is like that thing that worked for me anyway. And I started reading books, and I started like connecting with people that are like also like on this similar like wavelength. And talking with you guys, that really has been a part of like my own awakening, and that connecting, because I think that's something that I was missing from the church, I guess, was like that
Mm-hmm.
feeling of community. And I think in the quote unquote spiritual community, like online, like I was not vibing with that. And early on, like I really like I was so vulnerable to like that prey of like, oh, you're a star seed, like you're different. And I'm like, yeah, I have felt different my whole life, like that kind of thing. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
I'm just glad I didn't go down that pathway, because it could have been not so great. But
Yeah.
hmm
I think a lot of people that end up in this space have felt like that, have felt different their whole lives. And I
hmm
wonder if that's just not like a human thing that we kind of
hmm
all think that we're like sticking out like sore thumbs. And
yeah.
I wonder even if on a subconscious level, people that are like really normies, like if
hmm
they also feel like they stick out like a sore thumb, because I just feel like it's such a common human experience for us to feel like outside or a lack of belonging or
hmm
so I feel like it might be a more of a common experience than we think. And of course, like I've some of us maybe are a little bit less normie than
a
than others, and so it might be
little
harder for
spicy.
us to yeah, it might be harder for us to find people that we click with. But
hmm
it's hard to do that when you aren't in touch with what is authentic to
hmm
you. It's
yeah.
like then what are you drawing to you?
hmm
So like committing to caring about yourself and caring about like getting to the bottom of who you are, and
hmm
knowing that you are important and valuable, no matter who you are, I think is like such a important step
yes.
one. And you're right, there are a lot of people that do come into the space, and there are some ideas that are very alluring, like
hmm
you're actually an alien. So
yes.
hopefully that explains it all. Like, yeah, it's and I my hope is never to shame people
hmm
in any way, but I do think that it is important to like look at these ideas that catch people in these vulnerable spaces, and kind of see what they actually do, like what the impact is of these ideas being very popular. And
hmm
so I'm glad that you didn't go down that route, because
right.
that might have been another Another interesting lifetime
Oh God, yeah.
starseed Mackenzie.
Oh my God.
Could you
Oh
imagine?
no, I don't wanna. How scary. It could be
How
some.
so? Right? There's starseed Mackenzie out there in some other alternate
Right.
universe.
Hopefully, I'm not like on the internet.
Right? At least you're doing it privately in
Yeah.
your own home. Yeah. How did you find that sense of kind of belonging? For you mentioned that early on in life that you maybe didn't fit in or had a harder time finding people you
Hmm.
fit in with.
Yeah. Even still, I'm just like, I don't fit in with like, societal norms. Like, I'm just kind of
Mhm.
different. I'm an astrologer like you. I'm sure you feel like this
Yeah.
as well. Um,
Mhm.
I really think, astrology really was a big part of my awakening as well. Um, it's something that I always thought was interesting. Like, even in high school, I would kind of like read about it every once in a while, but it's not one of those things that I like studied. And then, after that accident, I had a lot of free time where I was kind of, in rehab for a year. And then after that, I was trying to integrate back into normal life. And I just kind of needed something to take my mind off things. And so I would read about astrology, and it started on like blogs. And then eventually I got some books, and that really helped me to, get to know myself from like a different perspective. And it's not like I would try and make it fit, like where I'm like, oh yeah, like that is me, when it really wasn't. But when I would like read it, I'd be like, oh yeah, I see certain aspects of that. And it's just like I couldn't get enough. And then, yeah, it really, and I found community in that. So that's been great. Like, it led me to be friends with you guys.
Yeah. And I mean that's the wonderful part of like finding things that you really enjoy is that you can also connect with other people
Hmm.
that enjoy those things. I think that's really cool. And you know, I I know that you're an amazing writer, which is another
Oh, thank you.
aspect I think of that Libra Mercury, but you have that Neptune and Uranus in your ninth house. And so I feel like I'm just curious. This is a maybe prophetic. This is me predicting on Mackenzie, but I feel like we're gonna see a lot more from you, written, perhaps audio, just in the astrological and spiritual space. Like that ninth house
Hmm.
was kind of popping out at me when I was
Yeah.
looking at it this morning. I was like, what's Mackenzie gonna be into? Because I do feel like you have a lot to share. You have a lot of insight and
Hmm.
experience really at this point to
Hmm.
share. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what you decide to do with all of that.
Yeah. It's definitely something I've thought about. And it is funny. Like, I always forget those are in my ninth house. And I'm like, when I sit and ponder that, I'm like, what could that mean? But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I'm glad I'm like early on in my studies and like being an astrologer, because I've got plenty of time to like figure it out. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm sure it's more than one thing, I feel like you're going to be doing a lot of different projects, but putting your insights out into the world in some way. And, I just feel like that's, right around the corner, to be
Hmm.
honest. But
Yeah.
we'll see. I'll be watching. I
Yeah.
wanted to talk to you a little bit about that you were talking about how you had this time after your accident. And I wondered about the adjustment from you being an able bodied person to
Hmm.
not being as able bodied as you were before. What was that transition like for you?
Oh man, that was. I think I was in denial for a long time, which is, not great, but just prolonged the healing process. And so, once I kind of reached a state of like acceptance, and accepting myself, that was very difficult, because I realized that, I have a lot of internalized ableism, and I think majority of society does, unfortunately. Um,
Oh yeah.
and so, even still, I'll catch myself like thinking these things about myself, and I'm like, I would never say that to another disabled person. Like, why would I think that about myself? And so, um, the more I've been in therapy, that has really helped a lot. Um,
Yeah.
just kind of unpacking that and connecting with other disabled people and um, kind of recognizing that it's not a me problem, it's a society problem. That has been like a huge healing process. And yeah, it's been a rough adjustment. And even still, like, it's I feel more normal than I think other people think I feel. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like
Yeah.
I'm just a person, trying to live my
Yeah.
life, and other people try and like project like this. I don't know, like they pity me a lot, and I hate that shit. I'm like, don't say that to me,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
just like an older man, he was like, "Oh, you're so strong. Like, I don't know if I could do it." I'm like, that doesn't mean what you think it means, sir.
Yeah. No, well, I didn't ask, so
Right?
you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, there is so much ableism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is something that I've been reflecting on the past several years as we've been in this pandemic.
Yes.
People are so resistant to the idea that their bodies can change
Mm-hmm.
in some way, that something can happen, like an accident or like a virus, that
Yep.
could change the way that their body operates.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that that is one of these like illusions that people tend to hold on to create a sense of separation. Like, oh, the thing that happened to Mackenzie could never happen to anyone else.
Yep.
Like they try to contain it and make it this thing so that they don't have to address the idea that their bodies may change, because the reality is that if we are privileged enough to live to old age, most of us will experience some level of disability.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality of being in a human body.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would imagine that you have this beautiful perspective on that a lot of able-bodied people don't have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when people see me, I almost represent like this shadowy side of like humanity that people don't want to look at or deal with. And so when they like see me, it's almost like, I don't know, like taboo, I guess, even though it's like not taboo. But there were laws up until like the 1970s that were called the ugly laws, and it was that people with like a physical disability weren't allowed to be out on the street past like 5 p.m. Like, it was something so ridiculous. And so this wasn't even like that long ago, and I don't think a lot of people realize just like how much ableism is in society. And so yeah, it's been a like, I don't even want to say difficult, because it's like even more than that. Like, it's just
Yeah.
been really hard. And yeah, I don't think people realize. Like, I was definitely one of those people where it's like, oh, like that happens to other people, that doesn't happen to me. And so when it did happen to me, it was kind of like this huge wake up call. And our bodies are not entirely resilient, and like um, we do bounce back, but like um, I don't think resilience is the right word. It's like we aren't um, indestructible or whatever. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I've also heard people talk about the resistance to accommodations just in
Mm-hmm.
general, like accommodating people's different abilities. And that's a huge thing, I'm sure, in your life is like, this
Yes.
place is not accessible to me, therefore I'm literally can't go there.
Yep.
And I don't think
Exactly.
those of us who are able bodied, like, we take that for granted very much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
It's
people
something.
have this resistance to
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, putting these accommodations, it's going to be expensive, it's going to be inconvenient. But the fact of the matter is this would benefit a lot of different people, including able-bodied people, to have these
Exactly.
types of accommodations. Like it doesn't have to be like a like an either or, like this is only for,
Hmm.
I don't know, there's just this weird limitation I think that people have about like accommodations not being like universally helpful when I think they actually generally are.
Right. Like if it's accessible to, someone in a wheelchair, like it's accessible to most people, which is so weird to me. And, I understand like the money side of it, but a lot of places here, like they're able to get around like those ADA laws because of like, when the building was built, or if they say they're like actively working on it, then they get like a grace period and like they can keep doing that forever basically. So it's just one of those things that's like exhausting. And it's like, if you made it accessible for everyone, then, you'd have more business, which makes no sense to me. So I don't know. It's
Yeah.
one of those, yeah, frustrating parts for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't even imagine. I know that like dealing with it with people in my life that have had need for accommodation, like even just in a little limited way, has been very difficult. Like there's sometimes where it's just like, well, there's nothing we can do, and just
Mm-hmm.
like, well, what are
Yeah.
you supposed to do then?
Right. And like, even just adding, like, I went to a restaurant one time and all they had were like those high tables that, like,
Mm,
bar stools would eat at. That was the only
right,
kind of tables they had. And like, how difficult is it to add in like four, lower tables? It was just like a
right.
actively, I don't know. It's one of those, yeah,
Yeah, just
things.
not thinking about accommodating like people that have different needs is really,
Yeah.
but that's the thing, is that a lot of it comes down to just like not thinking about it, not like occurring to people or not being a priority to people.
Hmm. And like, we're just like an afterthought that, like, once it's brought up, like, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. And it's kind of like, I wonder why, they probably don't know
Yeah.
anyone, which is like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that some of that is like denial, because I do think that
Hmm.
people know a lot more disabled people than they're even aware of.
Right.
Because also some people have invisible disabilities, and so like
Hmm.
there are people I know in my life that most people would never be like, you're disabled, and like that person has disabilities, you
Exactly.
know?
Hmm. And it's interesting because, in like my own unpacking of like ableism, and just kind of like exploring what disability is. I've always
Hmm.
had a disability because I've struggled
Hmm.
with migraines since I was 5 years old, and like truly debilitating migraines. And so it's kind of
Wow.
like, oh wow, I really have been a part of this community like my whole life, kind of thing. So it's
Yeah,
been expanding my education and like just awareness on this topic. And yeah.
absolutely. How
Hmm.
do you think that your disability has influenced your spirituality?
It's definitely one of those things where, because like I had a whole near death experience that was like, how do you explain that? And like,
Right.
even I have a hard time of like putting it into words, but I just like
Hmm.
have this knowing that there is, life goes on after this physical body. And so I think, any minority group, like, I think we're all more, I don't know that I have the words for it. It's kind of one of those things where we live in almost a different reality than people that have more privilege. And so turning to that spirituality and like our spiritual side, I think is something that a lot of people do. And I think I see people, and I'm not that I can see through people, but like the way someone treats me tells me a lot about who that person is and like what they value, and the kind of person that they are, kind of. And um, just having that awareness and like it's almost heightened my intuition in a way as well, where um, I have limited like physical senses, but in a spiritual way, it's kind of enhanced those like the clairs or whatever. And um, I don't know that I would have ever even taken like a mediumship class, like had I not been like in this space. And who knows if I would have even been in this space, like had my accident not happened.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things. I know I keep
Yeah,
saying
it's
that.
hard to untangle all
Hmm.
of it when it's all so mixed together.
Yeah.
But I think that your life experience is just very just unique and interesting into how it's played into you being where you are right
Hmm.
now.
Yeah.
And what you're saying about your intuition being heightened, that makes sense to me. Like
Hmm.
you're not as engaged with your physical sensations, therefore you maybe have some more room or energy to direct
Hmm.
elsewhere, and you are super intuitive. We have studied psychic mediumship together, and just looking at your chart as well, like I know you're intuitive. I know you're intuitive.
Thank you.
And how has it been, like, did you feel you were intuitive as a young person, or was that something that entirely came more recently in life?
Um, yeah, I think I always had a feeling of like, how do I know this? And like things would happen, and I've always had a very active dream life, and
Mm,
not like prophetic dreams, but just like little things would happen here and there. I'm like, oh, that's weird. And I had a friend that like we were almost like inseparable for like years. Like if someone said, "Oh, Mackenzie," it was like, "Oh, Mackenzie and Natalie," like we were just like a duo. And we would have these moments of like saying the same thing, and we would call it like brain waves. And like it's just like, so I've always like known that there's like a intuition part of myself, but like I didn't think that I had a strong intuition because of like, you know, other people in my life that would be like, "Oh, you're crazy." Like, "Oh, why do you say that?"
right.
Like stuff like that. And so I developed like really bad anxiety, unfortunately. And so
Mm,
it was almost hard for me to discern like what's anxiety and
mm,
like what's intuition, and like those gut instincts that I would get, I would almost kind of like shove them away and be like, oh, that's just anxiety. And like, it's almost like
right.
I would mix them. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I would say I never like would have called myself intuitive until like recently, I think. But it's always been there, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you said, like it's kind of like been there your whole life, and you've been doing it your whole life, but you didn't know that's what you were doing. And I think that was similar.
Yeah. Yeah, I really and truly had no idea. And now that I understand it better, I'm like, oh, this is just like how I've been operating my whole life. It's very bizarre to like look back and be like, what?
Right.
Because you think it's going to be more dramatic than it actually is oftentimes. For
Hmm.
people that are anxious, that struggle with anxiety to some degree, what would you say to them if they are looking to better differentiate between the feelings of anxiety versus intuitive
Hmm.
feelings?
I think with anxiety, it is it's one of those things where it feels scary. Like it feels like you almost feel like your heart race, and just like it's almost like, oh my god, this could happen, and then this could happen, and then this could happen. Whereas that intuition, it's kind of like this calm, like sometimes I feel it in my gut, but usually it's kind of like this calm voice that is just like comes through. And um, the more that you listen to that calm voice, the louder that voice gets, because it's kind of like, you strengthen that muscle. And it's just like this, it's soft. That's how I would explain it. Just like it's just this feathery, soft, like energy. And, if you listen to it, sometimes you don't get like that validation of like, oh, like my sister, she wanted us to visit for her birthday, but I just had this feeling of like, no. Like it was just like this light no. And, I never got like confirmation as to why we didn't go, but like, who knows? Like, what could have happened? Like, maybe I would have gotten COVID or like something like that. And, um,
Right.
so, it's one of those things you don't know, but like, the more you listen to it, the stronger that voice gets. So it's calm, and anxiety is like this rushed, like anxious, scary feeling, I would say.
Yeah. Do you find that over time, like trusting your intuition, that you have improved your relationship with it?
Yes, and it's almost like improved that relationship with yourself in a way. Because it's kind of like learning to trust yourself again. And for a long time, just from my own life experiences, I learned to not trust myself in a way. And so it's been, that learning to like, respect and honor and trust that part of yourself that is so human. I think all humans are intuitive, and um, whether it's like the people around us or just society in general, we've learned to not trust ourselves. And so it's been a process of doing that all over. And it's improved that relationship with myself. And that's beautiful. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you feel like you've done a lot of work on yourself? Like you've done a lot of therapy, a lot of reflection,
mhm.
and I feel like I've only known you for the past few years, but I can imagine just like, I feel like I've seen you grow just in the time that I know you, the amount of growth that you've had in
Oh,
like, I don't know, the last decade. Do you feel like you can just see this evolution in yourself?
yeah, definitely. And, it's one of those things where it's like, moment to moment, like month to month, it's kind of like you don't notice a difference. But, I was in therapy last week, and she pointed out that, like, even this time last year, I would have handled situations much differently. And who knows? I wanted to say, like, maybe that's post Saturn return, but it has been like just a slow evolution. And um, it's been very like healing, and a transformation of self. And I feel like the same with you though as well. Like I've noticed your own growth, and it's funny
Oh,
that like
thank
you
you.
weren't even in a spiritual space like a few years ago, because I feel like you're such a spiritual gift. I don't know, it's really cool.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I think people miss a lot of times, and you and I both were, I'm Scorpio Sun and Mercury. You've got your Jupiter conjunct your Venus, and then you've got the North Node, you got Pluto. I do feel like people miss the healing aspect
yeah.
of Scorpio energy. And I do feel like a lot of that healing is internal for us. Like
Hmm.
we have this opportunity to do a lot of healing in this life, through our experiences. And I just feel like it makes for really resilient people. I do think that
Hmm.
it's a very resilient energy.
Yeah.
And I do think it gives us, kind of a different flavor. We can roll with all of the different colors and shapes and aspects of what it means to be a human being, and we know how low it can get a lot of the time, I think,
Hmm.
because we've been there in different ways and at different points.
Yeah.
But it's a very powerful energy, I think, for that reason, because it can go any which direction and
Hmm.
make it happen.
Yeah.
So it's been very cool to see your growth. And also, this is like slightly non-astrological, but there's astrology involved. But this is you are about to end your 20s.
I know.
How are you feeling about that?
Um, I think 30 is one of those numbers where you're like, those societal expectations to be married and like have kids by 30. Like, I
Hmm.
think I've done enough work like on myself and kind of unpacked a lot of that um Hopefully, I don't feel like some kind of existential feeling. Um, but yeah, it'll be interesting. I've heard your 30s are more fun, so I'm excited for that. And like even seeing like
Yeah.
you and Kathy in your 30s, I'm like, they're having so much fun. And like, I feel like you guys are so true to yourself and authentic. And so it's kind of like you guys are my big sisters in a way.
Oh, well, it's an honor to be quite honest. I love that.
Mhm.
I think that our 30s are really great. Like I feel a lot less insecurity. I do think that part of it is like that post Saturn return
Mhm.
feeling. There is this level of confidence, and I just don't sweat the small stuff in the way that I did when I was a little bit younger, you know?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a really cool thing about aging, which is another thing that, like, socially we're very resistant to. Like, God forbid that, we change and grow,
Right.
you know, and we do it in a way that's like not the social, conditioning route of 2.5 kids and a
Yep.
husband in the suburbs or whatever, which we're not doing. That's not where you and I are at. And
No.
I feel like, there has to be some of us showing people that you don't need to do things the way that you were told.
Mhm.
And, the fact that we live lives that we enjoy and we find joy in, regardless of our circumstances, I think is a really powerful thing.
Mhm.
So I just feel like the 30s for you, I just feel like it's gonna be another kind of beautiful butterfly transformation for you.
Yes.
But
I hope.
well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk about you and being, I know it's a little nerve-wracking to be put on the spot like this. Like, we're talking about you. And
I know.
also, this was like a kind of a last minute plan. We had a different topic for today and we had some plans change. So I just want to commend you for rolling with it and jumping on with me
Oh.
today. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It was not as bad as I was anticipating, you know. It was
It's
fun.
always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.